Dartmoor. I work as a freelance naturalist. Entomology is one of my specialisms in there, so I spend a lot of time out looking at bees and wasps. Sorry, I've just got something on my screen. I'm just trying to up that. Right, okay, so we're going to start early in the year. One of the first bees I go to look for is not one of the rare ones, but it gets the season off to a start, and that's the hairy-footed flower bee. And a good place to see them is this old, really ancient cob wall at Alphington Church, just on the outskirts of Exeter. And many hundreds of these bees nest in this wall, and they come out usually about the end of February. It's a nice south-facing wall, so good place to see them and good place to get started for the year. This is a female. The males are buffy coloured. I'll show you a picture of a male in a minute. And the females are black, like a small bumblebee with little orange legs, but they hover around a lot. They particularly like flowers like lungwort, pulmonaria. So if you plant that in your garden, if you have a garden, you'll most likely attract this bee. The females nest in the wall, so they have a little hole in there, and they'll take pollen and make their nest cells in the wall. And then at the end, and as this bee is doing here, she's sealing up the nest. So the bees live for 2 or 3 months, usually into the spring, depending on how warm the spring is actually. And then once they die, the young develop over the summer. And actually the new bees are hatching about now. So they'll be hatching out in that wall, all ready for next spring. Called hairy-footed flower bees because the males have these really long hairs on their legs, and they use them in the courtship while they're mating with the female. No one's entirely sure why, but they waggle their legs up and down like this. It may be putting some sort of pheromone scent onto the female. No one really knows for sure, but it's quite entertaining to watch to see that. They have a cuckoo bee, which is also quite common in that wall. It's quite a mean-looking thing. This is Melecta albifrons, the common mourning bee. And as there are so many of the hairy-footed flower bees in that wall, there's good numbers of this bee as well. So it's a very good place to see those. This is one of the special species. This is Perkins' mining bee. It's one of the Andrenas, Andrena rosae. And I'm not sure if this has actually been seen in Devon, although it probably still exists up on the north coast somewhere around Hartland, I imagine. I photographed this one just over the border into Cornwall, and it's quite reasonably common along the north coast of Cornwall, so it must still occur up in that northern edge of Devon. So one to look out for. It's quite a distinctive thing, particularly in the spring. Has a very well-marked red body. That's the male, and that's the female. And they'll visit things like willow and blackthorn during the springtime. They also have a second brood, which is probably easier to find because there's masses of blackthorn blossom and willow in the spring, as you know. But in the summer brood, which flies in July and August time, really likes umbellifers. So if you look on umbellifers, you're likely to find this bee collecting, but it doesn't have so much red on it, so it makes it a little bit more tricky to identify. But wild angelica, which this one's on, is a real magnet for this bee in July time. This bee is the tormental mining bee, Andrena tarsata, and this is one of these bees that used to be fairly commonly recorded around Devon, particularly on Dartmoor, but in recent years it's become much more scarce, and it has across southern England as well. It seems to maybe retreating north with climate change. No one really knows, but it was Andrew and Stephen Falk and myself found it again for the first time after about 40 years, I think, on Dartmoor. And since that time, it's been found on the East Devon pebble beds and also at Holden, where I did this drawing. Just along the road, a friend of mine who photographs birds and insects and things just happened to send me a picture of a bee. He said you won't be able to identify it, but it was a tormental mining bee. And this is just along the road from the Holden Forest Centre there, along the big verges there. Lots of tormental, and that's where the bee is living, which is good news. That can survive in forestry plantations where where the wide verges still have a lot of wildflowers, and obviously tormental is essential for this one. It has a nomad bee, Robogeotiana, which again was widely recorded in Devon in the past, but it probably is still around, but it's a matter of tracking it down during the quite brief flight period of this bee, or both these bees, towards the end of June, early July, but they seem to come and go really quickly. So unless you're on the ball and got the time to go and look for them, you can easily miss them, as I did this year. Another bee which seemed to have disappeared from Dartmoor, Andrina bimaculata, the large gorse mining bee. But then in recent years, again, it's been refound. So it was found again by chance at Newbridge. Someone picked up a dead bee and gave it to Stephen Carroll to identify, and it turned out to be one of these. And also it's turned up again on the East Devon pebble bed heaths. And this year someone sent me some photos of some bees. This is a male, and this is a red-banded female from a site up in the Team Valley up near Dunsford Wood. It's actually in Finglewood on the opposite side of the river from the Devon Wildlife Trust Reserve. And there's a big meadow there. And there were dozens of these bees there. It was a really big colony. And they were really very red-banded, which was interesting because most of the books say they had some red on, but these were so red that the person who actually first found them thought they might be Andrina rosei, but turned out not to be. But still a really interesting bee to see. And its nomad subcornuta was quite common there as well. This is a bee which is quite a scarce thing. It's actually only recently been split by Stephen Falk. It's a thing, a water dropworm mining bee, Andrina ampla, and it was previously lumped with another Andrina, very almost identical species, which feeds on other umbellifers. But Stephen worked out they were actually two different species. And this one seems to occur along the western edge of Europe, in Portugal, Spain, Portugal, but also in southwest England as well. So we seem to have some quite good colonies, and particularly this one was at Slapton, and there's a little path there, just not far from the Field Study Centre, where the bee was nesting, and also it's a nomad, which is Nomada conjungens, which is thought to be a really rare nomada cuckoo bee. But it was actually quite abundant in this particular site, just along a little wall. And Stephen told me about it. I went down to see it that year, which is about 2 or 3 years ago now. And there were lots of Andrina ampla and lots of the nomads. I've been down the last couple of years, but I haven't actually seen the Andrina. But I have seen the nomad bees. They're still there. So the bee is obviously around, but it's just not in such high numbers, making it a little bit more difficult to find at the moment. But hopefully it will bounce back. It might be that the nomad bee is actually built up in numbers and actually parasitized too many of the nests, but I don't know for sure. Stretch of coast down at Prawl, one of our most important bee sites. In fact, it's one of the best sites probably in Britain for solitary bees and wasps, along the low cliffs, along the southern edge of Prawl Point, between out towards Start Point and down towards Prawl, which is a real haven for bees and wasps. This is a little chrysid wasp, beautiful little thing, Chrysis viridula. And this one goes on the chimney wasp, Polyneris spinipes, which makes these little mud chimneys coming out of the cliff faces there. So that's a nice one to see in the summer. And there's the cuckoo, entering the nest, and then she'll lay her eggs inside the nest of the mason bee. But the rarest bee, and this is Britain's rarest bee probably, Nomada sexfasciata, the six-banded nomad bee. And this is confined at the moment. It's only known from that stretch of coast that I showed you in the photograph there. That's the only bit of Britain it's now known for. It was formerly more widely recorded, but it hasn't been seen for many years in the other sites, so it maybe have disappeared. And its host is the longhorn bee, Usera, and there's really nice colonies of the longhorn bees along that bit of coast, and they're probably some of the largest ones in the country, so they're probably the only colonies which are a bit large enough to be able to withstand the cuckoo bee being around. I wouldn't be surprised if the cuckoo bee did turn up somewhere else, maybe in South Wales, because there's some big colonies of longhorn bees there, but so far it hasn't been seen anywhere else, or certainly not recently. And the way to see the nomad bee is to hang around the colony. The female longhorn bees don't have long horns, but they are quite distinctive, and they nest in the low sandy clay cliffs just above or just below the coast path there. And hang around long enough, and you might be lucky enough and see one of the 6-banded nomad bees entering their nests. Along the coast, this is in the East Devon coast, on the undercliffs actually, which is some little secret glades in amongst the trees there, with some open grasslands. This one is Humble Glades, in the sort of Devon side of Lyme Regis. And here we can find the two of our two snail shell nesting bees, Osmia oralenta, and which loves big snail shells and covers them in green mastic. It loves doing that. And when it's finished, they'll build several cells inside there and provision them with pollen. Then she makes a big green bung. It takes her hours and hours to do this, chewing up little bits of leaves and then flying back and attaching them to the entrance until there's just this huge green bung, and that will protect the developing young of the bee right through the winter. It's a bit like insulating foam as well, so maybe it acts as a bit of insulation until the next generation of bees emerge the following spring. The other one, which also occurs, you can see both of these Osmia bees, snail shell nesting ones together there, and this is Osmia bicolor. This one is an amazing little bee that also nests in snail shells. Usually she just makes one cell in each snail shell, and then she spends ages covering it up with grass. So she collects lots of grass and comes flying in with these you just see these big bits of grass flying along with this tiny bee at the end of it, and she makes a wigwam and covers up the snail shell after she's completed it. So one of my favorite bees to watch, that one. It's absolutely stunning thing. If you've never seen it, it's worth going to check out this bee. It flies again really early in the spring, starts to fly end of February, but March, April and May are the best times to see it doing the thatching. On the coast there this time of year, not a rare species now anyway, but a recent addition to our bees, the ivy bee. And usually the first week of October along this little slope at Branscombe, it's one of the latest colonies to emerge. And they nest in this cliff face here, and there's usually thousands of them. I try and go over once or twice in the first week of October. So yeah, 3rd of October, that one. And it's a very good place to see the mating balls as the females emerge from their burrows. As soon as they come out, they're mobbed by all the males which are patrolling along the cliff face there. And they actually form mating balls. The male's climbing onto the female. There is a female in the middle there somewhere, and they literally roll down the cliff and then end up at the base. So it's a good place to get some good views of them. And that was a dead male being hauled up by a Formica ant, Canicularia ant. It was carrying it up the cliff about a metre and then falling down, still attached to the antennae, and then it would do it again and then come back and do it again. Very persistent, but I never saw it get to its nest. So on to ants. Our famous ant really is this one, the narrow-headed ant, Formica execta. And this used to be fairly widely spread across southern England, from the Isle of Wight to Hampshire and Dorset, but now it's confined to not just Devon, but just to Chudley Knighton Heath in Devon. This is where it lives, and that's the nest. It's a type of wood ant, you can see. But it doesn't make huge, great mounds. It just makes a fairly small mound, like you can see just there. It lives on the heath, and also there's several nests along the road verge there as well. Just on the slip road of the A38, there's about 8 nests there, which isn't actually even heathland really. So it does show that it could probably live in other places as well. But maybe it can't disperse well, or it certainly doesn't compete well with ants. The redwood ant, and the redwood ant is on the march. It seems to be spreading all over the place, and it is a threat to this particular ant. The ant's also found in Scotland, so there's quite a few colonies in Scotland, but this is the only place now it's left in England. very distinctive with its U-shaped back to the head there, has a notch back of the head, and it's slightly smaller and slightly brighter looking than a redwood ant. They have a mating flight, which is in July. So the winged adults, they emerge not like the ants you see in your garden, which all fly in the evening. These ones fly really early in the morning. So you've got to get up about the end of July, early August, get to the heath just as the sun hits the nests, and you get a mass flight of all the winged adults as they fly off up into the trees. This is one of the spider hunting wasps. So I'll show you a few wasps just to finish off. And my favourite wasp, which I've been watching today, the heath potter wasp. Again, it's pretty scarce species in Britain, all found in southern England, mainly in Dorset and Hampshire and Sussex, but we do have a few areas where you get them in Devon. Bubby Heath is the most westerly population, and at the moment they're still going strong now. I was just watching them doing this today. They come in with balls of clay to build their beautiful little pots. It takes about 24 balls of clay on average to build a pot, and it can only take sometimes 2 or 3 hours to build one. Quite an amazing thing. And then once it's done there, the female wasp will then go off hunting for caterpillars in the undergrowth and fly these back. And she can put up to 38 pug moth caterpillars into one of those pots before she seals it up. She's already laid an egg in there, so it will eat all the paralysed caterpillars and develop into a new wasp. And just finish off by just showing what might turn up in the future with climate change as it is. This is a violet carpenter bee. This is actually bred in Devon. It was found on an allotment not far from the cob wall I showed you at the start, just in Alphington, in Exeter. There was a lady there who had some runner bean canes on her allotment, and in it was nesting these violet carpenter bees. And Stephen Carroll got wind of it through the Wildlife Trust, and so we managed in the winter to get hold of the canes, which were she'd taken home actually, and we found the nest inside, and she'd also found some of the bees which had just emerged. And so we'll just finish off with that. If you'd like to find out any more about some of the other things I do, there's information on heath potter wasps and things like that when I get it fixed, actually, because I've only just got my website up and running, but that's the details to my website. Thanks very much for listening, and if you have any questions, I'm not sure if we answer them now or we leave it all to the end. I'll leave it up to Tom. Thanks very much.
Brilliant, thank you, John. That was amazing. That was really good. Thank you for those. Some excellent photos there, excellent images. Does anyone have any questions at all now for John? If you do, pop them in the chat function, or stick your hand up via the reactions tab. If one comes to you throughout the talk, just pop it in the chat, and we'll make sure that all the speakers get sent them afterwards. So if they don't get answered this evening, then they will get answered. So does anyone have any questions for John at all? Nope, can't seem to find any. Okay, so we'll move on to the next talk, which is from Cathy, who's going to talk about the West Country Buzz project and the work that's going on across North Devon. So, John, if you're able to, there we are, that'll do, and there we go. So,
shall I share my screen now?
Yep, that would be brilliant. Oh, John, we do have one question from Jan. What type of soil does the potter wasp use? You're on mute, John. Sorry.
Right, find the button. Yeah, it needs soils which have got a high clay content. It likes, and it particularly likes the red clay that you get on the East Devon Commons. I've done some little experiments testing them, and they always like that. They much prefer it to any other clay, probably in the country. I don't know why, but it's another thing to investigate at some point.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again, John. I said a lot of brilliant stuff there, so that's excellent. So yeah, Cathy, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, and I'll just hand over to you now.
Right, can everybody see that okay? Yeah, cool. Okay, right. just get this going. Okay, so my name's Cathy. I work for the Bumblebee Conservation Trust on the West Country Buzz project, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we've been up to this year and a bit of background about the project. Myself and my colleague Daisy, who's pictured there, job share on the West Country Buzz project, and on the map on the right there you can see the blue line which shows the project boundary, and so we work across all of North Devon. So the project area extends all the way from the Cornish border up to the Somerset border. And the red splodges you can see there are where we're targeting most of our habitat work. So this is where we find the rarest species, which I'll go on to talk about in a moment. So we're targeting most of our work around these patches. So the project aims are to survey and monitor bumblebees because we need to know where they are in order to know how to help them. We also provide advice and support to raise awareness of what pollinators need. And then we try and do some habitat management work. So that's to increase the area of suitable habitat and its connectivity around where we've got existing populations of the target species. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about the surveying and monitoring aspect. So surprisingly, bumblebees are quite under-recorded in Devon, considering how charismatic they are and how most people instantly recognise bumblebees. They're really under-recorded. So we've been having a big push to try and train lots of people to go out and identify them and send us in our records. And as I mentioned, we are focusing on some of the rarities. So they're pictured here. So we've got the brown-banded cardabee on the left, the moss cardabee in the middle, which is very difficult to tell apart from the brown-banded, as you might be able to see from those photos. And then we've got the Ruderal bumblebee on the right-hand side there. So we've now got a small team of volunteer recorders who have been sending in records and helping us doing our survey work. And there's a picture of Hannah and Fraser up there from the National Trust. They've been doing a bee walk on the National Trust site. So bee walks are regular surveys, and it's part of our national recording scheme. So people walk a monthly transect, and they record all the bumblebees they see, and then they send that data in. And if you have a look on the Bee Walk website, there's a lot more information there about it if you're interested in getting involved. So the Bee Walk transects are really great because you can monitor what bees you've got on the site and see year on year, so you can tell how that might be changing. And when we started the project, there were 2 bee walks in the project area, and one of those was inactive, but we've now got 16, which is really great. But we need even more, so if you are interested in getting involved, then please do join the Bee Walk team. Also, ad hoc records are really welcome as well. So if you see a bee in your garden or out about on your walks, if you can share those records with us, and iRecord is a good platform. There's lots of other ones there as well. But that data gets through to us and we can see what the bumblebees are doing and where they are. And some of this data has been used to make the Bumblebees of Devon Atlas, which was written by Paddy Saunders in 2019. It was published, and you can download that for free. And there's lots of information in there about the ecologies of the bee, what they might need as well, and one of John's lovely illustrations on the cover there as well. And we're hoping that we can use that information that we collated to then compare with all the records that we're getting now, and we can see how the bees might be changing over time. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of those rarities and where they are in the project area and how they're faring. So the brown-banded cardabee is mostly centred around Bournemouth Burrows, which, if you're not familiar, it's about 4 square miles of sand dune habitat, and it's beautifully flower rich, and it's its kind of last place that it's surviving. There were a few records in the Heartland Peninsula, but my feeling is that we've probably lost it, to be honest, from there, because the numbers are so low and they've not been recorded in the last few years either. So it's really either just clinging on or we're about to lose it from Heartland. But this year we've got a bit of good news that we've found some brown-bandeds outside of Bournemouth Burrows and the vicinity. So we found a couple of brown-banded carder queens in August. So these were new queens. So the bumblebee life cycle is such that the queens come out in the spring and then they're looking around to make a nest, and so then they'll go into their nest and make lots of workers through the spring and the summer, and then when that nest is finished, when it's been successful, then the new queens and the males are produced and they disperse off from that original nest, which then dies. So the new queens that came over to this new meadow dispersed from somewhere else, possibly from Bournemouth Burrows, but we don't know, it could have been closer. But either way, it's really exciting to have found a record outside of Bournemouth Burrows. So this was in Croyd, which is just over the water from Bournemouth Burrows. And this is a National Trust site, and in collaboration with them, we helped make this meadow. So it's a newly created area, and the bees have found it, which is extremely exciting. And it's full of bumblebee favourites, things like red clover and rest harrow, and yeah, there were a couple of queens nectaring in there. It's very exciting. So let's hope they stick around. Also, just down the road, so where you can see the beach in that picture, just behind there is some sand dunes and some meadow habitat at the Ruderal holiday park, and I found 5 males hanging out in the holiday park as well, having their jolly holidays. And they were on tufted vetch and knapweed, loads of really lovely nectar-rich flowers. So potentially they're dispersing out from the burrows and looking for new sites. And if we can make enough habitat to support those bees in the new sites, then hopefully they can start to recolonise places where they used to be historically. So the moss-carder bee was also previously at Bournemouth Burrows, but we haven't seen it here since 2009. And that's not to say that it's not still there. It's a huge area to survey and to find it, but it is likely that it's in a lot lower numbers because it hasn't been seen. And that's possibly because this bee is generally more associated with kind of wetter habitats, and the dunes have been drying up over time. So we've lost some of those wetter areas that the moss-carder bee likes. But there is some dune restoration work being done at the moment with the Dunescapes project, where some of the wetter slacks are being dug out, and these wetter loving plants are being encouraged back, so we might get to see the return of the moss-carder. But we did find it at the Royal Marine Base next door at Chivenor in 2019, so it is still around in the area, but just at very low numbers. And then finally, the Ruderal bumblebee. So this one previously was found again at Bournemouth Burrows, the hotspot for all the bees, but a long, long time ago in 1961. But then following a big blitz that we did in 2019, then one of the volunteers there found this bee, which was very exciting to know that it's still there. So it's probably, again, in very low numbers. It hasn't been seen anywhere else outside of the burrows, but it is quite tricky to identify. It looks like one of our commoner bumblebees, the garden bumblebee, that has pretty much the same colour pattern, but there are a few subtle distinctions. So maybe that it's under-recorded, but it's probably also in very low numbers as well. So just going back to a bit about what we've been doing in the project to try and support these bees and the common bees also. So we advise landowners and community groups and volunteers and anyone who wants to get involved. And since the project began, we've, in 2018, we've advised on over 980 hectares, which is really exciting to know that we're getting the message out to lots of different people. So we do lots of one-to-one advice and give tailor-made land management advice. So if anyone's interested, please do get in touch with me and I'd be happy to help. So we take a look on the site, see what we can find, do a bee survey, do a habitat survey, and then work together to find ways that we can support the bees. We also do farm days. So in this picture here, we're doing a farm day about ditches and ditch management. And this is a site where the ditches support the brown-banded carder bee. It's right next door to Bournemouth Burrows, and there's some fabulous nectar-rich plants there. And so we were learning all about ditch management here. And then we also do things like guided walks where we take members of the public out, obviously less so in COVID, but things are getting gradually back to normal, thankfully. And we've been able to show people bumblebees and teach them about the identification and some of the habitat work as well. And then other ways we try and raise awareness are through things like talks like this one and articles and so on. But importantly, none of this could be delivered without the work that we're doing with partners. So we're working currently with 27 different partner organisations and groups up in North Devon, and without their support, there's no way we could do a landscape scale project like this. So we're really grateful to all of their input. So I'd finally like to talk about the habitat management element. So obviously this is really key to what we're doing. What we're trying to do is basically get more flowers, more habitat, more nesting space for these rare bees and other bees. And since the project started in 2018, we've helped create nearly 70 hectares of new bumblebee habitat. So here are just a few examples that I'm going to go through. So this picture on the left is doing some brush harvesting with National Trust. So this is on Braunton Burrows, which is species-rich SSSI sand dune, and with special permission from the landowner and from Natural England, we were able to go on and collect some seeds. So the vehicle there is pulling the brush harvester, which basically it goes over the tops of the grasses and the flowers and brushes off the seeds, and then it collects in the hopper there, and then you take the seeds and you dry them out, and then you can spread them somewhere else. And the National Trust have prepared some sites over at Woolacombe, and they're going to put the species-rich seed mix into their sand dunes and into the surrounding bits there, and make some habitat for the bees over there. So that's something that's extremely exciting, because it's such a huge scale, the operation that they're doing. They're creating loads of new meadows, and it's at this scale that we need for these bumblebees, because they need big areas of flower-rich connected habitats, and that's why many of them are really struggling, because it's so fragmented and there's not enough of it. So hopefully this will help those bees that are managing to disperse to stay where they are and make new colonies over there. And then on a smaller scale, which is just as important, is working with smallholders and other farmers to make their land more friendly for bumblebees. And this example here is where we did some green haying. So again, with the help of the National Trust, we did a green hay farm day, where the National Trust talked all about the different ways you can collect seed and make green hay. Now, green hay, for anybody who doesn't know, is where you collect the seeds where they're green, and instead of collecting all that material, instead of drying it out to make hay, you take that material while it's still fresh and you spread it over the site that you've just prepared. So you've got your species-rich donor site, you collect all the grass cuttings, and you take that and then you quickly spread it out on your receptor site that is not as rich. And you have to do it very quickly, because the green hay heats up in the bag, and it can make the seeds not do anything and damage those. So you have to spread it out really quickly. So we worked to find landowners who were interested in receiving this hay, and they worked really hard to prepare their sites and got them all ready for the green hay. And this came from Brownsham, which is culm grassland, and so it needs kind of a wetter habitat. So they've spread that out, and hopefully that'll be lots of nice flower-rich habitat in the making. Some other examples of the kind of habitat work we're doing. So on the left here is a meadow, which I am disappointed with myself. When I looked in my files, I thought I'll find this lovely meadow, some pictures of that. And because it's such a beautiful place, I'm too busy looking at the bees and the flowers to take a photo. So this one doesn't do it justice at all. So you have to use your imagination. But it's a fantastic species-rich grassland that was previously heavily horse grazed. And it's been designated as a county wildlife site on the basis of the fact that the flowers are amazing. And then also it's going to be amazing for the bees too. So the grazing has been reduced so that the plants can reach flowering at the right time for the bees. And the site owner is really keen on wildlife and has been doing a fantastic job there. And then on the right-hand side, this is some plug planting work that we did recently. This one is at a Devon Birds Nature Reserve. And so we've been, in this example, we've been making the margins of the pond more nectar-rich. So we've got loads of different flowers that went in there, things like knapweed and ragged robin and greater bird's-foot trefoil, lots of bumblebee favourites. And so we worked with the volunteer group, and they cleared the area ready, and then I rocked up with the plug plants and we put them in. So hopefully next year that will all take off and look really good. And then I wanted to mention about this piece of equipment. So this is something that's really exciting that's happened with the help of the North Devon AONB. Their Nature and Climate Change Fund awarded some money for Braunton Parish Council to buy a sweeper collector. So thanks to the hard work of the council and the Life on the Verges project, they paved the way to get this machinery. So this is to help with management of the road verges. So typically when road verges are managed, they get cut and then the grass cuttings stay in situ. And that means that it becomes very fertile, and that mulch and that fertility means that the wildflowers can't grow on the verges. Whereas if you collect up those cuttings, you're reducing the fertility and you can start to manage them as wildflower meadows. So by using this equipment, the verges can be managed as a massive interconnected corridor of wildflower meadows, which is extremely exciting. So it won't happen overnight, but it's something that long term is a really great thing to be doing. And this machinery is going to be loaned out to other neighbouring parish councils too. So potentially there'll be lots and lots of habitat for pollinators and lots of connected habitat, which is really important because they need that connectivity through the landscape. So finally, maybe you're hopefully wanting to get involved, feeling inspired. There's lots of different things you can do. So one of them is to plant bee-friendly flowers. And if you're looking for some ideas, then if you visit our Bumblebee Conservation Trust website, there's a Be Kind tool where you can find out how bee-friendly your garden is. And you can pop in what flowers you've got already, and then the app will come up with suggestions for you and tailor make it for your garden. So hopefully you'll get lots of ideas to be inspired by. And then other things you can do to get involved. We run lots of workshops on bumblebee identification. We do guided walks. You can join Bee Walk. We also do site visits if there are any landowners in the area who are interested in getting involved. And we also do work party days. So we're always looking for volunteers. If you fancy coming out and planting some bee-friendly flowers, then please do get in touch. So you can contact me at that email address. You can join our mailing list and get kept up to date with the different activities that are going on. And you can follow us on Twitter at BuzzingDevon. And the obligatory plug, you can join the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. Always looking for new members. And just to say thank you very much for everybody who's been involved in the project so far, and also to our funders. And thank you very much for listening. So I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Brilliant, thank you, Cathy. Again, some really great stuff there. Does anyone have any questions for Cathy at all? I've got one in the chat. Is there any others from anybody? I'll kick off with a question from Peter. Cathy, the different bees that you mentioned in your talk presumably require different habitats, or is the feeding similar and they just nest in slightly different places, or is it quite ubiquitous across all three species?
Yes, that's a good question. So the moss carder and brown banded are quite similar. So they nest on the ground surface in grassy tussocks. So they like where mice used to make their burrows, and they'll nest in those old mouse burrows. And the ruderal bumblebee nests underground. So that ecology is slightly different, and it does need slightly different other things. So the ruderal bumblebee you often find, say in farmland, where you've got nectar-rich margins, they often turn up there on the red clover. So wherever you get a massive abundance of red clover, you tend to find the ruderal bumblebee, which is why we probably don't have much of it in Devon, unfortunately. So where you find ruderal more is over in the southeast, where you've got the arable fields where the farmers may be in stewardship and they've put in these nectar-rich margins, and then the ruderal bumblebees have been turning up. So you tend to find the brown banded and the moss carder more associated with grassland, so flower-rich species, rich grassland.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Any other questions at all, Cathy?
I think Peter's got his hand up.
An actual physical hand up. Oh, Peter, you're on mute. If you'd like to unmute, you can ask your question.
Yeah. Could I just ask a supplementary to that? Is it, if you create a wildflower meadow, whether it's on a verge or margin of a field, will that suit all bees because it's nectar rich? Or is what you're talking about, the different habitats, is that just for nesting? So as the question is, is it different for feeding and different for nesting?
Yeah, but basically, yes. So if we're just thinking just for ease about the brown-banded and the moss-carder, they like sort of rougher grassland where it's quite tussocky, the grass is quite thick underfoot and kind of bouncy, and you don't get the same management basically. So if you're managing a wildflower meadow, that's cut for hay in summertime, and that grass is taken away, whereas you need that grass to be in situ for the bee to be nesting and not have its nest destroyed. So there needs to be a slightly different habitat. With the wildflowers that are there, it depends what species of wildflowers you have as to what bees will be attracted in. But to have the biggest range of bees, you'll have the biggest range of flowers. So for these rarer bumblebees, they tend to be long-tongued and they like the deeper flowers. So things like red clover and knapweed, something that's quite deep. Whereas some of our other bees that are doing it much better, they're shorter tongued. Things like the buff-tailed bumblebee is a quite short-tongued bee, and it tends to go for more open flowers. So if you've got a range of different flowers in your meadow, you'll have a range of bees.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cathy. Well, if you have any more questions, pop them in the chat, and we might come back to them. But we'll move on to the final talk of this evening, which is Andrew Whitehouse from Buglife, who will talk about beelines and some of Buglife's work in Devon. So, Andrew, when you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I'm in the final slot, and I'm up against Bake Off, I think, tonight, the start of the new series. So hopefully won't lose too many of you towards the end. I work for Buglife. Our Southwest office is in Plymouth. So we have quite a few projects in Devon. I haven't got time to tell you about all of them, obviously, tonight. But what I'm going to tell you about is an initiative which will help a huge number of our bees, wasps, ants, and other invertebrates. And it's something that perhaps lots of you can get involved with as well, and that is beelines. I've made the bold decision to put a video in my presentation. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this. So let's go for it. If you can't hear it, like, flap your arm. Cathy and John, I can see you, okay? So if you can't hear it, can you flap your arms?
We all see wildflowers as beautiful and great for our well-being, but for the thousands of pollinating insects that share this land with us, wildflowers are vital. But there's a problem. Pollinators are finding themselves in isolated oases, walled in by agricultural land, urban landscapes, roads and gardens. What humans see as neat and tidy, insects see as desert. Since 1940, we've lost 97% of our flower-rich meadows, and hundreds of our pollinator species are in decline. At Buglife, we have come up with a beautiful solution to the problem: beelines, a network of insect pathways along which we are restoring and creating wildflower-rich habitat. These insect superhighways will extend across the whole of the UK, allowing wildlife to move freely through our countryside and towns. But we need your help to make it happen. Restoring fields of wildflowers. Making space for wildlife in our towns, on road verges, local parks or gardens. Mowing the lawn less often. It's the easiest thing you can do for your local pollinators. Or how about planting a wildflower meadow in your local park or school? Then add your project to the Beelines map. Help us make our network of habitats bigger, better and more joined up. Find out more at buglife.org.uk. Saving the small things that run the planet. We all see wildflowers as beautiful and great.
You don't want to watch it again, do you? Right. Okay. So that's beelines in a nutshell. It's all about making space for wildlife across our countryside, through our towns and cities, and reconnecting our countryside so species can move more freely through the countryside. They can recolonize areas where they've been lost from. They can move in response to pressures such as climate change. Now, the beelines map in Devon looks like this. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we go about doing the beelines work. So first off, we need a map. And this is a map of where we have prioritized the best places to create or restore wildflower-rich habitats to reconnect up the countryside. And this is based on ecological principles, but also on the opportunity and feasibility of making this happen on the ground. So working with experts, we've come up with this map. And then of course, once we've got a map, ecologists or conservationists are very good at drawing maps, but we need to make sure we're going to deliver this stuff on the ground. So working in using lots and lots of the similar techniques that Cathy's been saying about, we work with others to deliver beelines. So whether it is creating and restoring habitat, working with contractors, or working with farmers, working with local volunteers, and working in partnership. All of our beelines work pretty much is all done in partnership with others. And everyone can help. So people who have contributed towards beelines through creating and restoring wildflower habitats, putting dots on our map, include farmers, local authorities, schools, churches, water companies, the MOD, Highways England, all different organisations. If you own some land, or if you're able to influence the way some land is managed, then you're in a position where you can help to deliver beelines, help to connect up our countryside. So that's kind of beelines, and I'm sorry it's a bit rushed, but I have only got 20 minutes. What I'm going to tell you about is a project that we are working on with South Devon A and B, and hopefully this will give you a good idea about how beelines works in reality. Here is South Devon. This is that lovely place that John was telling you about earlier on. This is Poole Point, which is, as John said, one of the most important sites in the whole UK for bees and wasps, and a whole load of other invertebrates as well. Now, the project Life on the Edge will be working across the South Devon coast from Plymouth all the way around to Torbay. And the idea is that we will work in 5 hotspots along the coast to deliver the conservation work that some of Britain's rarest species need. But also we're going to work in between those hotspots to join them up by delivering the South Devon beeline. Lovely, wonderful hotspot places like the Irm Estuary. This is Mothercombe here. Down on Bolt Head to Bolt Tail, another nationally important site for invertebrates. Start Point. I should have done a test and seen if you folks could identify all these, shouldn't I? And here we are, Berry Head. So that's the eastern end of our project area. Now, of course, not all of the South Devon coast looks as nice as those photos. In fact, some of it is not the friendliest place for wildlife. So, and this threatens the long-term survival of some of these species that we want to help. But also, it presents opportunities. So there are opportunities here to restore the coast for wildlife, to restore wildflower habitats, to expand those remaining fragments which are left, to reconnect them. And as I said, this will help us to reconnect the countryside. So by delivering the South Devon coastal beeline, we'll be able to boost the diversity and the abundance of insects, other invertebrates and wildlife along the coast, as well as helping those extremely rare species. And we'll be able to make our wildlife habitats along the coast bigger, better and more joined up. So here are some of the species our project will focus on. That one in the middle there is the 6-banded nomad bee that John told you about earlier on. So this is Britain's rarest bee, which is now only found at Ruderal. The project will focus on over 30 species of threatened and declining invertebrates. And yeah, for some of them, South Devon is a national stronghold, or it's the only place where the species survives in the whole of the UK. It's not just invertebrates, so there's over 30 plant species that we will also be giving a helping hand. And our aim is to work with landowners and land managers, local farmers, in what we call a multi-taxa way. So we'll be looking to deliver activities and conservation action that will not just focus on a single species, but will help a whole assemblage, a whole range of species together. It will go beyond invertebrates. we are focused on invertebrates, we are Buglife, but it'll go beyond invertebrates. It will benefit rare plants and declining birds as well. So life on the edge, it's going to set some of these species on the road to recovery. It's going to benefit hundreds more. We're going to bring local communities and visitors to the South Devon coast closer to the wonderful wildlife on our doorstep. We're going to provide people with opportunities to help in nature's recovery. We'll empower local communities to make a difference. And, you know, we would like all of you to be part of this story as well. If you'd like to find out more about the project, which incidentally hasn't started yet, we hope it will start next spring. There's some more information on the South Devon AOMB website, which is just there. If you want to find out more about beelines more generally, please visit buglife.org.uk, where there's lots more information. You can access guidance on how to create wildflower habitats. You can add your project to our map by dropping a dot in and tell everybody about the wonderful work you're doing. And of course, the other thing you can do is to join Buglife. So there's my plug. If you have any questions about it, please ask away. And I've noticed that Adam Davison is lurking in the audience as well from the AOMB, so he may be able to chip in as well. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Andrew. Always enjoy dropping Adam in it as well if he is around. So there has been a couple of questions. One is that video available anywhere? Is there a link to it, or is that widely available to share?
Yeah, you can find it on our website, on our Beelines landing page, and it's on our YouTube channel.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Second one is another one from Peter, who says he's part of the Yale Estuary to Moor project. Who should they contact locally in Buglife to get specific advice on meadow restoration?
Contact me, I'll be happy to help.
There you go.
So I put my email address in the chat.
That would be very useful. Yes, that'd be brilliant. Thank you. So any other queries at all to any of our speakers this evening?
I just wanted to say something to Andrew, really, because he says I'm lurking. He often talks about the six-banded nomad bee lurking around the longhorn mining bees' nest sites. And that's what these nomads do, these cuckoo bees. They lurk and look for a chance to get involved. A bit like myself, maybe. But I'd just like to say to all the speakers, really, absolutely brilliant stuff. I've relatively only recently discovered invertebrates. Previously, I always thought they were just bird food. And I do know some bat enthusiasts that only think they're bat food, but there's so much more in their own selves. And I think we're all in a position where we can spread the news about this absolutely wonderful area of wildlife that everybody can get involved in. And you know, insects surround us all, and there's some fascinating stories and anecdotes, and it's just been great to hear some of the life stories of some of these amazing creatures. So thanks once again to all the speakers.
Yeah, thank you. I'll follow that up. So yeah, thank you to all three speakers this evening. It's been brilliant. If you have any final questions, drop them in the chat at all, and I'll make sure to pass them on. But yeah, finally, again, just to express my thanks to Cathy, Andrew, and John for a great evening. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good one. And you should make Bake Off, actually, Andrew. Now it's 5 minutes to go. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Tom. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Cheers.